What are the best albums from the progressive metalcore band ERRA? In this video, I'm going to be giving you my ranking of their 6 studio-length albums, and I want to hear what you guys think their best album is and why. There is no wrong answer because I think they have a really dope discography. Without further ado, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it. It helps me out a lot. Let's get into the ranking. Starting off at number 6 with Impulse. It may seem a little like amateur to put a record here that was like their first studio-length album, and it's no diss to Impulse. I own it on physical copy. I just think it feels more in line with what you get from a lot of other progressive metalcore and djent bands. I think a lot of the things that made ERRA what they are and made them get so popular in the first place just wasn't super present on Impulse yet. It still felt like they were fleshing out their ideas, and a lot of the choruses, while they still hold up, and a lot of the riff ideas still hold up, I think they kind of pale in comparison a little bit with what would come later in their discography, and it definitely has that sort of rudimentary feeling. It's still a good album, and I still think it has a good mix to it, but I think it is the weakest produced album of pretty much any of theirs, except maybe another one that's coming to mind. It's one of those records that I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to unless I had a reason to, because I went back and listened to all of ERRA's discography for this video, and Impulse, I just wouldn't listen to it over like any host of other albums on this list. Next up at number 5, we have the brand new album, Cure. So I gave this record an 8 out of 10, and I personally really enjoyed it, but I can fully acknowledge and understand why it isn't hitting for so many longtime ERRA fans. I made an entire video on that, and it's easy to see why the experimentation that they're going in may seem like they're not playing to their strengths. In my opinion, the biggest issue with this one is they are taking so many of the hallmarks that made them special in the first place and dialing it back. So Jesse's like soaring choruses aren't as present as they used to be. His vocals are a lot more subdued and melancholic and sort of like dirge-like, whereas JTKV doesn't really experiment much in his range and kind of just sticks in his one solid mid-scream, and that's fine, but it makes it far less unique of an ERRA experience. Now, I'm an ERRA fanatic and I love all of their material, but I think that all of that combined with the very over-compressed style of it very much makes it one of their weaker albums. And speaking of over-compressed albums, number 4, the self-titled album. Now, I very much could like Cure or the self-titled album more than the other depending on the day, but I think that the self-titled album just has more bangers on it, better songwriting, but I also think this is the start of ERRA really overproducing their material to sound a little bit too mechanical. I still adore this album, I still really want to own it on physical copy, but the sort of electronic technological way that they started writing their material, I think just doesn't really hit the same as their older material. That's just me. I am not the biggest fan of the UNFD era of ERRA, self-admittedly, but it still is a very crisp, well-produced album, and you gotta admit that these riffs, rhythmically and melodically, are just so harmonious and well put together. A lot of catchy choruses, a lot of hard-hitting riffs, and even though JT doesn't really go out of his range too much, something about the way he comes across on this album is probably the most ferocious he sounded on any of the albums he's appeared on, so that is a perk in its direction, and I think a lot of the ideas here, even though it is different from past ERRA, very much do work out in their favor. Oh, I'm gonna hate doing this top 3. I'm going to fucking hate doing this top 3. This just depends on the day. But at number 3, I'm going with Neon, and I think for any ERRA fan that is a simp for their melodicism, this is the album for you. So many of these guitar lines are drenched in reverb and atmosphere. The whole album is coated with so much atmosphere. It has some of my favorite vocal lines that Jesse has ever put together. I love the inclusion of JT exploring a little bit more of his range and getting a little more comfortable than he was on Drift, and it's just a crisply produced album that is phenomenally well put together, and the only reason that it doesn't rank higher than the other two is simply because I think that a lot of the ideas on this record are a little lesser than the other two. The other two set the bar extremely high, and Neon didn't necessarily exceed it, but it definitely did capitalize on the best parts of ERRA that makes me attracted to them in the first place. But I got this record on release, and I just love Neon. In my opinion, one of the strongest openers of any ERRA album, but with that being said, Augment and Drift have fantastic openers as well, and ERRA, if they can do one thing, they can successfully open up an album. They know how to set the tone and get your expectations set sky high properly. And so the top 2 I'm going to try to explain to the best of my ability. At number 2, I have Augment. I love this album. I love the thematic nature of it. I love the philosophy and the way that it's approached, and it easily has some of the best fucking songs that ERRA have ever written, period. Songs like Dementia, songs like Alpha Seed, songs like Pulse are literally just staples for any ERRA fan. Once again, similar to Neon, the only reason that it's not higher is I really like the melodicism of ERRA, and so I am a simp for an album like Drift or like Neon, because I think that a lot of times Augment kind of dwells in the progressive metalcore niche in more of the harsh way, and that can be something that you like more than their melodicism. The balance of this track listing is fantastic. The vocal dynamics are fantastic, some of the best tracks that Jesse has ever sounded on. The lyrics are incredible, and I just love the mix of everything. One of the strongest openers and enders of any ERRA material, let alone any progressive metalcore or djent record. But also similar to Neon, I think that there are a couple tracks in the midpoint that are a little bit more forgettable or not as great as the rest, but I definitely think it's a banger from front to back. Which obviously leaves me with Drift. This is my favorite ERRA record, and it's not even close. As much as it could depend on the day, my top 3, I genuinely just feel like Drift is always going to be my favorite. It was the first ERRA album I heard. It was one of the first albums that I ever just bought on a whim on physical copy without really knowing much about them. It is the record that made me fall in love with them. It is the record I have so much nostalgia with, so much personal investment in, and them taking more of an approach of the personal songwriting and the depictions of mental health, anxiety, self-exploration, and stuff like that obviously is gonna resonate, and you're gonna be able to relate to it a bit more than the philosophy that they worked with on a record like Impulse or Augment. And so my personal attachment and nostalgia definitely does cloud it a bit, but there are so many incredible tracks on this album. The opening track will never fail to just get me so hyped in that melodic sphere, and I think this is the best time that they have mixed their djentism with almost like that invent animate sort of progressiveness that just sounds so pleasing to the ears, and it has its heavy moments, but this is probably the softest ERRA record overall, and I just love it. And it goes to show you don't have to be heavy all the time to make an incredible album. What is your favorite ERRA album? You can let me know down in the comment section below. There is no wrong answer, and I can't wait to discuss it with you. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.